They called it the Silence of Terra. 4-3 standard galactic cycles, every communication array, every diplomatic channel, every trade route that led to the Sol system went dark. The Galactic Council's messages bounced back unread. Trade vessels found their passage blocked by automated defense platforms that appeared overnight. Even the most advanced quantum entanglement communicators met with nothing but void. The galaxy's most powerful civilizations, species that had conquered star systems and bent reality to their will, suddenly found themselves locked out by a species they had dismissed as barely beyond their technological infancy. Humanity, those chaotic primates who had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, had done the unthinkable. It said no, not just to a single demand, not just to unfavorable terms, but to the entire galactic order itself. When the Council demanded humanity surrender their claim to 12 resource-rich systems, provide 70% of their military fleet for galactic defense, and submit to guided development under alien oversight, Earth's response was not the expected negotiation or even angry refusal. It was silence. Complete, absolute, terrifying silence. And then, as the galaxy would soon learn, humanity began to work. What happens when a species that has spent its entire existence fighting itself, perfecting the art of warfare through countless conflicts, suddenly finds a common enemy? What occurs when minds that created nuclear weapons, biological warfare, and artificial intelligence decide they've had enough of being told what they can and cannot do? The galaxy was about to find out why humanity's greatest weakness, their inability to unite, might actually be their greatest strength when they finally did. This is the story of what happened when humanity refused to negotiate, and how their defiance shook the very foundations of galactic civilization itself. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood at the observation deck of Orbital Station Genesis, watching the massive alien ships position themselves around Earth like predators circling wounded prey. The Galactic Council fleet had arrived 3 days ago, and their message was clear: humanity would submit or face the consequences. She pressed her palm against the reinforced glass, feeling the slight vibration from the station's rotation. 20 years of diplomatic service, 15 spent trying to secure humanity's place in the galactic community, and it had come to this. The Council demanded unconditional surrender disguised as integration. "Ambassador," came a voice behind her. Dr. Marcus Webb, Earth's foremost xenobiologist and her closest advisor, approached with a data pad clutched in his weathered hands. His face bore the exhaustion of someone who hadn't slept in days. The final ultimatum just came through. Sarah turned away from the viewport, squaring her shoulders. Even facing annihilation, she refused to show weakness to these alien overlords. "Let me guess. Same demands." Marcus nodded grimly. 70% of our military assets, including all dreadnoughts and carriers. 12 of our most resource-rich colonies, including New Terra and the mining operations in the Kepler system. And he paused, his voice catching slightly. Complete submission to their developmental oversight program. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Sarah had read the classified reports about what that program entailed. Species after species reduced to little more than pets, their cultures erased, their people transformed into docile servants of the galactic order. The Zephyrians, once proud warriors, now served as manual laborers on council worlds. The ethereal collective, masters of quantum technology, had become nothing more than living computers. "How long do we have?" she asked. 48 hours. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing down on her shoulders. Earth's military, impressive by their own standards, was laughable compared to the Council fleet. Humanity had perhaps 200 warships scattered across their territory. The Council had brought over 3,000, each one capable of glassing an entire planet. The smart play was obvious. Negotiate. Find some middle ground. Accept partial subjugation in exchange for survival. It's what every other species had done when faced with the Council's overwhelming might. It's what her diplomatic training had prepared her for. But then she thought of her daughter, Emma, attending university on Mars. She thought of the colonists on New Terra, building their lives with their own hands under alien suns. She thought of humanity's messy, chaotic, beautiful democracy and how it would look under alien guidance. "Marcus," she said quietly, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "What would happen if we refused? Not negotiated, not compromised, just said no." The old scientist blinked in surprise. "Sarah, you can't be serious. They have the firepower to— I know what they can do to us," she interrupted. "I'm asking what we could do to them." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his scientific mind clearly working through possibilities. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "We'd lose, Sarah. In a straight fight, we'd lose badly. In a straight fight, yes. But humanity has never been very good at fighting fair, have we?" Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Understanding, perhaps. Or maybe just madness brought on by impossible circumstances. The Council expects submission or resistance. They don't expect something else entirely. Exactly. Sarah moved back to the viewport, watching as Council shuttles moved between their massive ships like insects around streetlights. They've conquered dozens of species using the same playbook. Overwhelming force, diplomatic pressure, then either quick capitulation or equally quick annihilation. What they haven't faced is a species that simply refuses to play their game at all. Marcus joined her at the window. "What did you have in mind? Remember the old Earth saying about taking your ball and going home?" Understanding dawned on his face. The silence protocol. Sarah nodded. 3 years ago, a small group of military strategists and scientists had developed contingency plans for exactly this scenario. Not plans for victory. That was impossible, but plans for something far more dangerous to the established galactic order. Plans for complete withdrawal. "If we can't win and won't surrender, we disappear," she said. "Cut all communication, abandon the outer colonies, pull everything back to the Sol system, and lock the door behind us." That's suicide, Sarah. Without galactic trade, without access to alien technology, we survive for millennia without alien help. We can do it again. She turned to face him fully. But, more importantly, what happens to the galactic economy when humanity disappears? We're their newest members, but we've already become essential. Human manufacturing, human agricultural techniques, human entertainment. 17 species have become dependent on human trade in just the past decade. Marcus's eyes widened. The cascade effect. Precisely. The Council rules through economic and military dominance. But their system depends on each species fulfilling their assigned role. Remove one piece, especially one as integrated as humanity has become, and the whole structure becomes unstable. The data pad in Marcus's hands chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it and paled. It's from Admiral Richardson. The Council fleet is moving into attack formation. They're accelerating the timeline. Sarah felt a cold calm settle over her. The moment of decision had arrived earlier than expected, but she was ready. She'd been ready since the moment she saw the first Council ship enter Earth's solar system. Send a message to all human settlements, all colonies, all ships in space, she said. Code Black. Full implementation of Silence Protocol. Everyone has 6 hours to reach designated safe zones or return to Sol. Sarah, once we do this, there's no going back. The Council won't forgive us. They'll never stop hunting us. She smiled grimly. Good. Let them hunt. Humanity has been prey before, but we've also been predators, and we've never forgotten how to bare our teeth. As Marcus hurried away to send the coded messages, Sarah remained at the viewport. The Council ships were indeed moving closer, their exotic energy signatures painting aurora-like patterns across Earth's upper atmosphere. Beautiful and terrible, like everything about the galactic civilization humanity was about to reject. Her communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission from the Council flagship. The translation matrix kicked in, rendering the alien speech into crisp English. Human representative, came the voice of High Counselor Vox, the reptilian overlord who served as the galaxy's supreme authority. Your time grows short. Transmit your surrender terms, and we shall be merciful in our integration of your species. Sarah activated the transmitter, knowing this would likely be the last communication between humanity and the galactic government for a very long time. High Counselor Vox, I thank you for your patience during our deliberations. Wisdom prevails among your kind, then. Excellent. We shall begin the integration process immediately upon. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady and clear. We haven't been deliberating surrender terms. We've been saying goodbye. Silence on the channel. She could almost hear the confusion in the pause. Explain yourself, human. Humanity withdraws from all galactic accords, treaties, and trade agreements effective immediately. We rescind our application for council membership. All human assets are being recalled to soul space as we speak. Any attempt to pursue our vessels or enter our territory will be met with force. You cannot be serious. You are declaring war on the entire galaxy. No, Counselor. We're declaring independence from it. There's a difference. Another long pause. When Vox spoke again, his voice carried a dangerous edge. You test our patience, human. Your entire species could be exterminated in a matter of days. Perhaps. But that would make you the first galactic power in history to commit genocide against a species that posed no direct threat. It would also eliminate your newest source of innovation and cultural exchange. Tell me, Counselor, how many of your subject species were actively researching quantum tunneling technology before humanity shared our theoretical frameworks? She could hear agitated conversation in the background, alien voices arguing in languages the translator couldn't parse. Finally, Vox returned to the channel. Very well. You wish to negotiate. State your terms. You misunderstand again. We're not negotiating anything. We're leaving. Goodbye, High Counselor. Sarah cut the transmission before Vox could respond. Around the observation deck, status lights were already shifting from blue to red as automated systems implemented the silence protocol. Every human facility outside Soul Space was receiving the same signal. Pack up, shut down, come home. Her communicator buzzed again immediately. This time, it was Admiral Richardson from the Defense Fleet. Ambassador, they're charging weapons. All Council ships showing hostile targeting patterns. Let them, Sarah replied calmly. Are our evacuation ships clear? The last transport jumped to hyperspace 30 seconds ago. Soul Space is locked down tight. All communication arrays are switching to internal mode only. Then we're ready. She paused, thinking of her daughter on Mars, of the colonists abandoning their homes on distant worlds, of humanity turning its back on the stars to make a stand in their birthplace. Admiral, you have permission to implement defensive measures. Roger that. All ships. This is Admiral Richardson. Defensive pattern Delta. Make them come to us if they want to fight. Through the viewport, Sarah could see Earth's defense fleet taking positions around the inner planets. Compared to the Council Armada, they looked like toys. But those toys carried something the Council had never faced before, a species with nothing left to lose. The first Council ship opened fire, lance beams of coherent energy reaching across space to test Earth's defenses. Automated defense platforms responded, their fusion warheads creating brief stars in the darkness. The galaxy's newest war had begun. But as Sarah watched the light show, she wasn't thinking about the battle. She was thinking about what would happen next. Humanity had just done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had refused to submit or die fighting honorably. Instead, they had chosen a third option. They had chosen to disappear, taking their innovations, their trade, their cultural contributions with them. The Council could destroy humanity, but they couldn't force them to serve. And in a galaxy built on economic interdependence and careful political balance, simply removing yourself from the equation could be the most disruptive act of all. The communication board lit up with dozens of incoming signals from Council species across the galaxy. Trade partners wanting to know why their human contacts had gone silent. Researchers asking about interrupted collaborative projects. entertainment networks demanding to know why human content had stopped flowing. Sarah smiled as she watched the signals pile up, each one representing another crack in the Council's absolute authority. They had expected humanity to beg or fight. They hadn't expected them to just leave. The galaxy was about to learn a hard lesson about humanity. When you tried to cage a species that had spent its entire evolution learning to adapt and survive, you didn't get a docile pet. You got something far more dangerous. You got a species with absolutely nothing left to lose. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped the armrests of her command chair as the colony ship Horizon's Edge shuddered under acceleration stress. Around her, the bridge crew worked with grim efficiency, their faces illuminated by the red glow of emergency lighting. Outside the viewport, the binary stars of the Kepler system grew smaller as they fled toward home. "Status report," she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos of the past 6 hours. "We've got 15,000 colonists in cryogenic suspension, plus another 3,000 essential personnel still awake," reported Commander Singh from a navigation station. "Cargo holds are at maximum capacity with everything we could salvage from the surface installations." Elena nodded, trying not to think about everything they'd left behind. New Kepler had been humanity's crown jewel among the outer colonies, a thriving world with cities that gleamed like jewels under alien suns. Now, it was just another abandoned monument to humanity's brief participation in galactic civilization. "Any pursuit? Negative, Captain. Local council forces are maintaining station around their administrative center. They seem more confused than aggressive." That made sense. The local council garrison had been established primarily to monitor human activities and ensure compliance with galactic law. They weren't equipped to handle a complete evacuation of an entire star system's worth of human settlements. The communications officer, Lieutenant Park, looked up from her station with concern etched across her young features. "Captain, we're receiving multiple hails from the Council Administrative Station. They want to know why we're abandoning the colonies." "Tell them to file a complaint with their superiors," Elena replied dryly. "We're under no obligation to explain our actions to occupation forces." The irony wasn't lost on her. Just days ago, those same council representatives had been diplomatic observers ensuring proper development protocols. Now they were revealed for what they'd always been, an occupying army waiting for an excuse to take over. Her personal communicator buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth Command. Elena activated it with her thumb print, and Admiral Richardson's weathered face appeared on the small screen. "Elena, good to see you made it out. What's your status?" "All Kepler system colonies are evacuated, Admiral. 15 ships total, carrying about 40,000 people and as much equipment as we could manage. We had to leave the heavy manufacturing facilities behind." Richardson's expression darkened. "Understood. That's unfortunate, but expected. How are the civilians handling it?" Elena glanced around the bridge at her crew. These people had built lives on New Kepler, raised families, created communities. Now, they were refugees in their own ships, heading back to a solar system many had never seen. "They're scared, sir. Angry. A lot of them are asking why we didn't just accept the Council's terms. At least then, they could have stayed in their homes. And will you tell them the truth? That those homes would have stopped being theirs the moment we signed that surrender document." Richardson nodded approvingly. "How's the technical evacuation proceeding? Did your people manage to implement Protocol 7? Elena smiled grimly. Protocol 7 was something her engineers had developed in secret over the past year. A contingency plan they'd all hoped would never be necessary. Every piece of human technology on New Kepler has been wiped clean. Manufacturing facilities, research labs, communication arrays, even the entertainment systems in residential areas. The Council will find empty buildings with nothing but basic life support systems. Excellent. Any problems with the industrial sabotage? The mining operations were thoroughly decommissioned. The automated extraction systems suffered catastrophic failures right before we left. Purely accidental, of course. Richardson's grin was fierce. Of course. Tragic how unreliable alien-designed equipment can be when operated by humans. The joke felt hollow given their circumstances, but Elena appreciated the attempt at levity. Protocol 7 wasn't just about denying the Council access to human technology. It was about making sure they couldn't simply replace humanity with more compliant species and continue benefiting from human innovations. Sir, what's the situation in soul space? Are we really going to war with the entire galaxy? Richardson's expression grew serious. We're not at war, Elena. War implies we're fighting for something. We're doing something much more dangerous, which is we're proving that the Council's absolute authority isn't as absolute as they thought. Before Elena could ask for clarification, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Lieutenant Park's voice cut through the noise with practiced urgency. Captain, we've got company. 3 Council interceptors just dropped out of hyperspace behind us. Elena's blood went cold. Council interceptors were fast, heavily armed, and designed specifically to run down fleeing vessels. If they'd been sent after the colony evacuation fleet, the political situation had just escalated dramatically. Are they hailing us? Yes, ma'am. Standard surrender demand. Elena looked back at Admiral Richardson's image on her communicator. The old warrior's eyes were hard as steel. Elena, you know what you have to do. She did. The evacuation fleet was carrying 40,000 civilians, but it was also carrying something else. Every human who had lived in Council space for the past decade had learned alien technologies, studied alien cultures, memorized the economic and military systems that kept galactic civilization functioning. They weren't just refugees. They were intelligence assets of incalculable value. The Council couldn't be allowed to recapture them. All ships, this is Horizon's Edge, Elena broadcast on the fleet frequency. Prepare for emergency acceleration. We're running the gauntlet. She cut the transmission and turned to her helmsman. Take us to maximum burn. I don't care if it damages the engines. Captain, at maximum acceleration, the civilians in cryo won't survive the stress. The containment systems weren't designed for. The civilians won't survive Council interrogation chambers either, Elena snapped. Execute the order. The ship lurched as its fusion drives engaged at full power. Elena felt herself pressed back into her command chair as artificial gravity struggled to compensate for the massive acceleration. Around the bridge, coffee cups slid across surfaces and unsecured equipment clattered to the floor. Council ships are gaining, reported Singh. Their drive systems are more advanced than ours. Elena had expected this. Human ships were tough and reliable, but they couldn't match alien engineering for pure performance. Fortunately, they planned for this contingency too. Commander Singh, implement Crazy Ivan maneuver on my mark. Singh's eyes widened. The Crazy Ivan was a desperate tactic developed by human naval strategists after studying Council ship movements. It relied on the fact that alien tactical doctrine emphasized efficiency and predictability over adaptability. Captain, if we miss the timing, we won't miss it. Elena watched the tactical display as the Council ships closed distance, their formation tight and professional. Perfect formation for pursuing fleeing vessels through hyperspace. Terrible formation for dealing with someone who suddenly stopped running and started fighting. Mark, the Horizon's Edge, and her sister ships suddenly cut their engines and spun around, presenting their forward weapon arrays to the pursuing Council vessels. For a split second, the aliens found themselves in the unprecedented situation of charging directly at their intended prey. Fusion torpedoes and particle beams lanced out from the human ships. The Council interceptors, caught completely off guard, tried to evade but were moving too fast to change course effectively. The lead ship vanished in an expanding cloud of superheated gas. The second managed to avoid destruction but took heavy damage to its propulsion systems. The third interceptor veered away from the engagement, probably transmitting a request for reinforcements. All ships, resume course for Sol, Elena ordered. Maximum burn. As the human fleet accelerated away from the ambush site, Elena couldn't help but feel a savage satisfaction. The Council ships were faster, yes, but They relied on intimidation and overwhelming force. They weren't accustomed to prey that fought back with cunning and desperation. Admiral Richardson's face reappeared on her communicator, his expression mixing pride with concern. "Well done, Elena. But you realize what you've just started? We destroyed a Council military vessel in what they'll claim is unprovoked aggression. Worse than that, you've proven that human ships can defeat Council vessels under the right circumstances. That's going to terrify them." Elena frowned. "One lucky ambush isn't going to change the military balance, sir. It's not about the military balance. It's about the psychological one." Richardson leaned forward, his weathered face filling the screen. For centuries, the Council has maintained order through the perception of absolute superiority. Every species that challenged them was crushed so thoroughly that others stopped trying. But you just proved that humans can kill Council ships and escape to tell about it. The implications began to sink in. If humanity could destroy Council vessels and survive the experience, what did that say about the Council's much-vaunted invincibility? How many other species might start asking themselves whether submission was really their only option? "Sir, are we trying to start a galactic civil war?" Richardson was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of someone who had spent decades making impossible decisions. "Elena, 37 species have been absorbed into the Council's empire over the past 5 centuries. 37 civilizations that chose submission over extinction. Do you know what they all have in common? They're all still alive. They're all still slaves. Oh, the Council calls it guided development and mutual cooperation, but it's slavery nonetheless. Entire species reduced to fulfilling whatever role the Council deems appropriate for them. The Zephyrians were warriors, so now they do manual labor. The Ethereal Collective were scientists, so now they serve as living computers. The Melodic Resonance were artists, so now they provide entertainment for Council elites." Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. And humanity? We're innovators, problem solvers. The Council's plan was to turn us into their research and development department. Give us problems to solve, take credit for the solutions, and make sure we never forgot who was in charge. The communication officer spoke up again. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's Ambassador Chun." Elena activated the ship-wide communication system. Sarah Chen's voice filled the bridge, calm and authoritative despite the chaos engulfing human space. "To all human vessels returning to Sol, this is Ambassador Chun aboard Orbital Station Genesis. As of 30 minutes ago, the Council fleet around Earth has begun bombardment of our outer defense platforms. We are officially at war." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. "Va." The word they'd all been avoiding was finally spoken aloud. However, Chun continued, "This is not a war we intend to fight on the Council's terms. Project Exodus is now in full effect. All human activities outside the Sol system are ceasing immediately. We are withdrawing completely from galactic civilization." Elena exchanged glances with her senior officers. Project Exodus was the logical extension of their colony evacuation. Complete isolation until humanity could figure out how to deal with the Council threat. "I know this is frightening," Chen's voice continued. "I know many of you are wondering if we've made the right choice. But I want you to understand what we're really doing here. We're not just running away. We're demonstrating something that no species has ever shown the Council before." The ambassador paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a strength that seemed to reach across the light years to steady Elena's resolve. "We're showing them that their way isn't the only way, that there are alternatives to submission and extinction, that sometimes the best response to an impossible choice is to refuse to make it at all." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Elena looked out at the stars and thought about the 40,000 people in the ships around her. Colonists and researchers, engineers and teachers, families and individuals who had given up everything to return to a home many of them barely remembered. They weren't just running away. They were making a statement that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity would not be caged, would not be controlled, would not accept a future written by alien overlords. The Council could destroy them for that defiance. Probably would destroy them. But they couldn't make humanity submit. And in a galaxy built on the assumption that every species would eventually bow to Council authority, that simple fact was more dangerous than any weapon. The journey back to Sol would take weeks. Elena settled in for a long flight home, knowing that when they arrived, they would find a system preparing for siege. But they would also find something else. They would find humanity united in a way it had never been before, standing together against the darkness between stars. The Council war fleet stretched across space like a metallic constellation, thousands of ships positioned in perfect geometric formations around the Sol system. From his command bridge aboard the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, High Counselor Vox observed the human defensive positions with growing frustration. 3 weeks had passed since humanity's incomprehensible withdrawal from galactic society. 3 weeks of silence from the Sol system while panic spread through Council space like wildfire. Trade routes disrupted, technological exchanges halted, cultural programs abandoned. The economic ripple effects were already causing unrest on dozens of worlds. Status report. Vox commanded, his reptilian features reflecting the cold light of the tactical displays. Admiral Keth Moore, the Council's most experienced military commander, approached with data tablets clutched in his forearm grasp. The insectoid warrior's compound eyes glittered with an emotion Vox recognized as uncertainty. The human defensive positions are unexpected, High Counselor. Vox's tail lashed impatiently. Explain. They've abandoned all territory beyond the asteroid belt between their 4th and 5th planets. Every human settlement, mining operation, and military installation in the outer system has been evacuated or destroyed. They've pulled everything back to protect just their inner worlds. A sound defensive strategy for a weaker force. Perhaps, but their execution is troubling. Keth Moore activated a holographic display showing the Sol system in 3 dimensions. They've turned their asteroid belt into a fortified barrier. Thousands of automated defense platforms, minefields that extend for millions of kilometers, and what our sensors indicate are some form of stealth installations we can't properly identify. Vox studied the display with growing unease. The human defensive line was unlike anything in Council military doctrine. Instead of protecting every asset, they'd created a fortress around their most vital worlds and abandoned everything else. What their fleet? Approximately 200 ships, mostly concentrated around their 3rd and 4th planets. They're outnumbered 15 to 1. Then, why haven't we simply overwhelmed them? Keth Moore's mandibles clicked nervously. We've attempted several probing attacks. The results have been concerning. Before Vox could demand clarification, alerts began blaring throughout the command center. The tactical display lit up with red indicators as human ships emerged from the asteroid belt, moving at maximum acceleration toward the Council fleet's outer perimeter. Battle stations, Keth Moore commanded. All ships prepare to engage human raiders. But the human ships weren't attacking the main fleet. Instead, they streaked toward a group of Council support vessels positioned near the system's outer edge. Supply ships, tankers, and communication relays, the vulnerable infrastructure that kept the massive siege fleet operational. Intercept course, Vox ordered. Those support vessels are essential to our operations. Already attempting, High Counselor. But observe the human tactics. On the display, the human ships moved in a coordinated swarm, their formation constantly shifting and adapting. When Council interceptors moved to engage them, the humans split into smaller groups, forcing the larger alien ships to divide their attention. When the Council ships tried to protect the support vessels, the humans used their superior maneuverability to attack from unexpected angles. Within minutes, 3 Council supply ships were drifting in space, their hulls breached by human torpedoes. The human raiders were already accelerating back toward their defensive positions before Council reinforcements could arrive. Casualties? Vox demanded. Minimal on our side, Keth Moore reported. But we've lost significant supply capacity. More importantly, they've demonstrated something unprecedented, which is they're fighting like prey animals instead of warriors. Vox's confusion must have shown on his scaled features, because Kethmore elaborated. Traditional military doctrine assumes both sides want to control territory or achieve specific objectives. But the humans aren't trying to defeat us in battle. They're trying to make occupying this system as costly as possible. As if to emphasize the point, the tactical display lit up with new alerts. Human missiles were emerging from hidden positions throughout the asteroid belt, targeting Council ships that had moved too close to the defensive line. The weapons weren't powerful enough to destroy the massive alien vessels, but they didn't need to be. They were designed to damage sensors, communications equipment, and life support systems. They're waging a war of attrition, Vox realized. Worse, they're demonstrating that Council forces can be harassed, damaged, and frustrated by a technologically inferior opponent. Word of this is spreading throughout Council space. Vox felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. The Council's authority rested on the perception of absolute superiority. Every previous conquest had been swift, decisive, and overwhelming. Species that resisted were crushed so thoroughly that others learned not to try. But humanity wasn't being crushed. They were being systematically ground down, yes, but they were fighting back every step of the way. And, more importantly, they were proving that Council fleets could be hurt. Communications, Vox called out. Open a channel to the human leadership. The communications officer, a pale-skinned humanoid from the collective, worked at his station for several minutes before looking up with confusion. High Counselor, there are no active communication arrays in the human defensive zone. They appear to have switched to some form of quantum-entangled system that we cannot access. Then broadcast on all frequencies. Demand they respond. We've been trying that for 3 weeks, sir. They aren't acknowledging our signals. Vox's tail lashed with increasing violence. The humans were doing something no species had ever done before. They were ignoring the Council completely. Not negotiating, not defying, not even acknowledging that the most powerful military force in the galaxy was sitting on their doorstep. Sir, called out the sensor operator, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the human third planet. Some kind of industrial activity. Specify. Unknown. The planet's electromagnetic interference is blocking our detailed scans, but power consumption has increased by orders of magnitude over the past week. Admiral Kethmore approached with another data tablet. High Counselor, we receive reports from across Council space. The economic disruption from humanity's withdrawal is accelerating. How significant? 17 species have lodged formal complaints about disrupted trade relationships. The melodic resonance entertainment networks are reporting a 30% drop in consumer engagement since human cultural products stopped flowing. The Zephyrian labor guilds are asking why they can't access human industrial techniques anymore. Vox felt his anger building. This is precisely why we cannot allow this defiance to continue. If other species believe they can simply withdraw from Council authority, High Counselor, interrupted the communications officer, his voice tight with anxiety. We're receiving a priority transmission from Council Central. It's the Prime Assembly. The main display shifted to show the August chamber where the galaxy's ruling council conducted business. Representatives from dozens of species filled the tiered seating, their varied forms united in obvious agitation. Prime Speaker ZYX9, an artificial intelligence housed in a crystalline matrix, spoke with the harmonized voice of the Assembly. High Counselor Vox, the Assembly requires an immediate status report on the human situation. Prime Speaker, we have the Sol system under siege. Complete capitulation is simply a matter of time. Time is a luxury we no longer possess. The economic disruptions caused by humanity's withdrawal are cascading through Council space. We are receiving reports of unrest, work stoppages, and, in some cases, open questioning of Council authority. Vox felt his blood chill. Surely these disruptions are manageable. The Ethereal Collective has formally requested permission to establish independent trade relationships with non-Council species. The Zephyrian labor guilds have begun organizing what they call work action committees. 3 minor species have filed petitions asking for clarification of their rights under Council law. The implications hit Vox like a physical blow. For centuries, the Council had maintained order by ensuring that every species was dependent on the galactic system. Trade, technology, culture, even basic resources flowed through Council-controlled channels. But humanity's withdrawal had demonstrated that independence was possible. Worse, it was proving that the Council needed its member species more than those species needed the Council. What are your orders, Prime Speaker? End this situation immediately. Use whatever force is necessary, but restore the status quo before other species begin following humanity's example. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Vox looked out at the human defensive positions, these stubborn primates who had somehow managed to threaten galactic civilization by simply refusing to participate in it. Admiral Keth Moore, prepare the fleet for full assault. No more probing attacks. No more attempts at negotiation. We end this now. High Counselor, a direct assault on prepared positions will result in massive casualties. Acceptable losses. The alternative is the collapse of galactic order. As Keth Moore hurried away to prepare the attack, Vox remained at the tactical display, studying the human positions. 3 weeks of siege, and the defenders had shown no signs of weakening. If anything, their attacks were becoming more coordinated, more effective. They were learning. That realization sent another chill through Vox's system. Humanity was treating this siege as a classroom, studying Council tactics and developing countermeasures in real time. Every skirmish, every probe, every attack was teaching them how to fight a technologically superior opponent. The assault would succeed, of course. The Council fleet was simply too large, too powerful for the human defenses to repel indefinitely. But the victory would come at a cost measured in more than ships and lives. It would cost the galaxy its peace. Because once the shooting started in earnest, once Council forces were seen struggling to defeat a supposedly primitive species, every other member of galactic civilization would start asking questions. Questions about strength, about alternatives, about whether the protection offered by Council membership was worth the price of submission. Vox watched as his fleet began moving into assault formation, their engines painting the darkness with exotic fire. The humans had forced this confrontation, but they'd already achieved something unprecedented. They'd made the invincible Council look vulnerable. And in a galaxy held together by fear and economic dependence, looking vulnerable was the first step toward becoming irrelevant. The real battle, Vox realized, wasn't for control of the Sol system. It was for the future of galactic civilization itself. And humanity had already won the first round by changing the rules of the game. The alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the fleet as thousands of ships prepared for the assault that would either restore Council authority or shatter it forever. Either way, the galaxy would never be the same. In the asteroid belt defensive line, automated systems detected the massive enemy fleet movement and began transmitting warnings deeper into the Sol system. On Earth and Mars, in the orbital habitats around Jupiter, and the mining stations throughout the belt, humanity prepared for the storm. They'd already proven they wouldn't surrender. Now, they would discover whether they could survive what came next. Dr. Lisa Zhang barely felt the vibration as another Council bombardment struck the outer hull of Research Station Prometheus. 6 hours into the Council's final assault, and the massive orbital platform orbiting Mars was still operational, though its defensive screens flickered ominously under the sustained attack. She kept her attention focused on the holographic display floating above her workstation, watching as terabytes of data flowed from monitoring stations throughout the Sol system. The Council fleet was winning, exactly as everyone had predicted. Human defensive positions were falling one by one, pushed back toward the inner planets by overwhelming firepower. But the data told a different story than simple military defeat. Dr. Zhang called Commander Torres from across the research center, his voice tight with stress. We're receiving casualty reports from the asteroid belt defensive line. Lisa looked up from her analysis, pushing exhaustion fog glasses up her nose. She'd been awake for 37 hours straight, monitoring the battle and analyzing its implications. How bad? 17 automated platforms destroyed, another 34 damaged. But the Council has lost 46 ships destroyed and over 200 damaged. Their casualty rates are running almost 3 to 1 against us. Lisa nodded grimly. The numbers were actually better than projected. Human defensive doctrine had been designed around the assumption that they couldn't win a straight fight, so they'd optimized for inflicting maximum damage while preserving human lives. Automated systems, robot defenders, and remote-operated weapons did most of the fighting while human crews stayed safely behind multiple layers of protection. What about the industrial sites on Mars? Torres checked his tablet. The surface installations are holding, but barely. The underground facilities are secure. That was the crucial detail. For the past 3 weeks, while the Council fleet had established their siege, humanity hadn't been idle. Every major industrial facility in the Sol system had been working around the clock, but not on weapons or warships. They'd been manufacturing something far more dangerous to galactic stability: independence. Lisa's workstation chimed with an incoming priority message. She activated the secure channel and saw the face of President Maria Santos appearing on her screen. The leader of the United Earth government looked exhausted but determined. Dr. Zhang, what's your assessment of the Council force deployment? They're committing everything to this assault, Madam President. Our intelligence estimates suggest they've pulled ships from garrison duties across 17 sectors. This isn't just an attack on humanity. It's a statement to the entire galaxy. And our industrial output? Lisa allowed herself a small smile. On schedule. The fabrication plants on Mars, Europa, and Titan have exceeded production targets. We'll be ready. President Santos nodded slowly. Then it's time. Activate Operation Lighthouse. The transmission ended, and Lisa felt her heart racing. Operation Lighthouse was humanity's final gambit. The plan they developed when it became clear that simple military resistance wouldn't be enough. If it worked, it would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. If it failed, it would provide a very expensive funeral pyre for human civilization. Commander Torres, she called out, signal all stations. Begin Phase 1 transmission. Across the Sol system, massive communication arrays came online simultaneously. Not the quantum-entangled systems humanity had been using for internal communication, but old-fashioned electromagnetic broadcasters powerful enough to punch through the Council's jamming attempts. For the first time in 3 weeks, humanity began speaking to the galaxy again. But they weren't speaking to the Council. Throughout Council space, on worlds where dozens of species lived under alien rule, the broadcast began appearing on communication networks, entertainment systems, and data exchanges. The message was simple and was repeated in hundreds of languages. Citizens of the galaxy, this is the free human republic. We want to tell you what we've learned. Lisa monitored the transmission strength as the first phase of Lighthouse went live. The Council fleet was trying to jam the signals, but humanity had learned from 3 weeks of electronic warfare. Their broadcasts adapted frequency, power, and even transmission type in real time, staying ahead of alien countermeasures. On her screen, she could see the text of the message that was now reaching every corner of civilized space. 3 weeks ago, the Galactic Council demanded that humanity surrender our sovereignty, our colonies, and our right to self-determination. When we refused, they brought the largest military fleet in galactic history to force our compliance. But while they've been attacking us, we've been learning about them. And we want to share what we've discovered. The second phase of the broadcast began, and Lisa's pulse quickened. This was the dangerous part. For months, human intelligence operatives and refugees from Council space had been gathering information about the true nature of galactic civilization. Not the public face presented to new species, but the hidden mechanisms of control and exploitation. The Galactic Council claims to represent a voluntary association of equals. This is false. Every species under Council authority has been systematically stripped of economic independence, military autonomy, and cultural identity. The Zephyrians, once proud warriors, now serve as manual laborers because the Council decided their martial traditions were incompatible with galactic peace. The Ethereal Collective, masters of quantum science, are forbidden from pursuing independent research. The melodic resonance can only create art approved by Council censors. Throughout the research station, Lisa's team monitored reaction feeds from across the galaxy. Communication networks were lighting up as species that hadn't spoken to each other in decades began comparing their experiences under Council rule. But, more importantly, we want to tell you what we've learned about yourselves. Phase 3 began, and Lisa held her breath. This was the information that would either liberate the galaxy or get humanity completely exterminated. Every species under Council authority contributes something essential to galactic civilization. Zephyrian labor built the infrastructure. Ethereal quantum technology enables faster-than-light communication. Melodic art forms the basis of intersystem cultural exchange. But none of you receive fair compensation for these contributions. The Council takes credit for your innovations, profits from your labor, and tells you that you should be grateful for their protection. On the monitoring displays, Lisa could see Council forces throughout the galaxy scrambling to shut down the broadcasts. But the signals kept adapting, jumping between frequencies, and transmission methods faster than alien technical crews could compensate. Humanity has spent 3 weeks proving something very simple. The Council needs you more than you need them. Our withdrawal from galactic society has disrupted trade routes, crashed entertainment networks, and created economic chaos throughout Council space. Not because we're particularly important, but because every species is important to the system they've built. Commander Torres looked up from his communication station, his face pale with excitement and terror. "Doctor, we're receiving responses. Hundreds of them. Species throughout Council space are acknowledging our transmissions." Lisa nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "What kind of responses?" "Questions, mostly. The Ethereal Collective wants to know more about our quantum research. Zephyrian labor groups are asking about human manufacturing techniques. The melodic resonance is requesting cultural exchange programs." It was working. Humanity's broadcasts weren't just reaching other species. They were encouraging them to start talking to each other. For the first time in centuries, the member species of galactic civilization were communicating directly instead of through Council intermediaries. But the most important phase was still to come. Citizens of the galaxy, we offer you a choice. You can continue accepting Council authority, hoping that submission will eventually lead to fair treatment. Or you can follow humanity's example and simply stop participating in their system. Phase 4 activated, and every human industrial facility in the Sol system began broadcasting technical specifications, manufacturing procedures, and resource extraction techniques. Everything the Council claimed only they could provide, humanity was now giving away for free. You don't need the Council's permission to trade with each other. You don't need their approval to pursue scientific research. You don't need their protection from threats they probably created to justify their own authority. What you need is the knowledge and tools to become truly independent. Today, we're sharing both. Lisa watched as her screens filled with acknowledgement signals from across the galaxy. The Ethereal Collective was already analyzing human quantum communication protocols. Zephyr engineers were studying automated manufacturing designs. Dozens of minor species were downloading everything they could access. The galaxy was about to become a much more crowded and chaotic place. Her workstation chimed with an urgent incoming transmission from Admiral Richardson. The old warrior's face looked haggard, but his eyes burned with fierce satisfaction. "Dr. Zhang, the Council fleet is pulling back from their assault. They're receiving priority communications from across their territory. Uprising? Not exactly. Mass resignations. The Ethereal Collective has formally withdrawn from the Council's Technical Advisory Board. The Zephyrian Labor Federation is demanding direct negotiations with client species. 3 minor worlds have declared themselves neutral territories open to independent trade." Lisa felt a moment of dizzy elation before reality set in. Admiral, they can't just let this continue. The Council will have to respond, probably with massive force. Richardson's grin was wolfish. Let them try. They just discovered that their fleet isn't big enough to occupy every rebellious world simultaneously. And every ship they send to suppress one uprising is a ship that can't be used to attack another. Before Lisa could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Commander Torres's voice cut through the noise with barely controlled panic. Doctor, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the Council flagship. They're powering up some kind of weapon system we've never seen before. Lisa's blood went cold. The Council had technological capabilities humanity could barely comprehend. If they decided to end the human problem with overwhelming force. But then her communication board lit up with signals from across the galaxy. Not from the Council, but from the species that made up galactic civilization. This is the Ethereal Collective, came the first transmission. We are formally protesting any use of prohibited weapons against civilian populations. Zephyrian Labor Federation stands with Human Independence Movement, said another voice. Melodic Resonance demands immediate ceasefire and neutral mediation, declared a third. Dozens of other species added their voices to the chorus. For the first time in galactic history, the member civilizations were standing together against Council authority. Not in armed rebellion, but in something far more dangerous. They were refusing to cooperate. Lisa realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented. Not a revolution or a war, but a complete breakdown of the system that had held galactic civilization together for centuries. The Council could destroy humanity, but they couldn't destroy the idea humanity had released into the galaxy. The idea that cooperation was voluntary, that independence was possible, and that no species had to accept subjugation in exchange for protection. Her screens showed Council ships throughout the galaxy struggling to maintain order as communication networks lit up with interspecies coordination that bypassed official channels. Trade agreements were being negotiated directly between worlds. Research collaborations were forming outside Council oversight. Cultural exchanges were beginning without official approval. The galaxy was learning to govern itself. Phase 5 of Operation Lighthouse activated automatically, broadcasting a final message that would ensure there was no going back. To our fellow species throughout the galaxy, you are not alone. Cooperation is stronger than domination. Independence is possible, and the future belongs to those brave enough to choose their own path among the stars. The transmission ended, and Lisa looked around the research station at her colleagues. They were exhausted, terrified, and probably doomed. The Council would never forgive this defiance, and humanity would pay a terrible price for unleashing chaos into their carefully ordered galaxy. But they had also accomplished something that would echo through history. They had proven that even the most powerful authority could be defeated, not through violence or destruction, but by simply refusing to accept that their power was legitimate. The Council could destroy the Sol system. They couldn't destroy the ideas that were now spreading like wildfire through galactic civilization. And in the end, ideas were more dangerous than any weapon. 1 year after humanity's defiance began, Ambassador Sarah Chun stood in the observation lounge of the newly constructed Independence Station, watching ships from 17 different species dock at the massive orbital facility. The space station, built in the former neutral zone between the Sol system and Council space, had become the unofficial capital of what media outlets were calling the Free Species Alliance. It was a name that made Sarah smile every time she heard it. The Council had spent a year trying to suppress what they called the human contagion, but their efforts had only accelerated the collapse of their authority. Every heavy-handed crackdown pushed more species toward independence. Every economic sanction created new opportunities for direct trade between worlds. Sarah, came a familiar voice behind her. She turned to see Dr. Marcus Webb approaching, looking far better than he had during those terrifying early days of the siege. He carried a data tablet and wore the satisfied expression of a scientist whose theories had been proven correct. Marcus, please tell me you have good news. I've had enough crisis briefings for one lifetime. He laughed, a sound that had become more common as the situation stabilized. Actually, yes. The latest economic projections show that galactic productivity has increased by 37% since the independence movement began. Sarah raised an eyebrow. How is that possible? Half the galaxy is in political upheaval. Because species are finally free to pursue their comparative advantages without council oversight. The Ethereal Collective has made breakthrough discoveries in quantum physics now that they're allowed to conduct unrestricted research. Zephyrian manufacturing has become incredibly efficient now that they're working for themselves instead of council quotas. The melodic resonance cultural exports have exploded now that they're not filtered through council censors. Sarah nodded, thinking about the reports she'd been reading. The galaxy was indeed changing, but not in the way anyone had expected. Instead of descending into chaos and warfare, the removal of council control had unleashed a wave of innovation and cooperation that surprised everyone, including humanity. What about the council themselves? Any word from High Counselor Vox? Marcus's expression grew more serious. That's the interesting part. They've essentially withdrawn to their core worlds and stopped trying to enforce their authority in the outer sectors. Intelligence suggests they're dealing with massive internal unrest. Before Sarah could respond, her communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission. She activated it to see the face of Captain Elena Vasquez, now commanding the defense coordination efforts for the Alliance. Ambassador, we've got a situation developing. A council diplomatic vessel has just entered Alliance space. They're requesting permission to dock and requesting negotiations. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. After a year of silence and attempted suppression, the council was finally ready to talk. What kind of negotiations? They won't say. But, Sarah, it's not just any diplomatic vessel. It's High Counselor Vox himself. The implications hit Sarah immediately. The supreme leader of galactic civilization was personally coming to negotiate with the rebels and outcasts he'd been trying to destroy for the past year. That suggested either complete desperation or a fundamental change in council policy. Grant them safe passage, but full security protocols. I'll meet them in Conference Room Alpha in 2 hours. As Elena's image faded, Sarah turned back to Marcus. Well, this should be interesting. Any thoughts on what they might want? Honestly, I think they want what every other species has discovered over the past year. They want to join the Alliance. Sarah stared at him in disbelief. The Council wants to join the organization created specifically to oppose them? Think about it, Sarah. They've lost control of 2/3 of galactic civilization. Their member species are trading directly with each other, sharing technology, forming military alliances, and completely ignoring Council authority. The old system is dead, and everyone knows it. 2 hours later, Sarah sat across a polished conference table from High Counselor Vox, studying the alien leader who had once commanded the largest military force in galactic history. The reptilian being looked older somehow, his scales dulled with stress, and his posture carrying a weight that hadn't been there during their first confrontation. High Counselor, Sarah said formally. Welcome to Independence Station. I admit I'm curious about what brings you here. Vox was quiet for a long moment, his serpentine eyes studying the human who had started the cascade that destroyed his empire. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the arrogance that had characterized their previous communications. Ambassador Chun, I come to discuss the future of galactic civilization. I was under the impression that the Council believed they were galactic civilization. The Council was wrong about many things. The admission seemed to cost him considerable effort. We believed that order required control, that stability demanded submission. We were incorrect. Sarah leaned back in her chair, trying to process this dramatic change in attitude. What changed your mind? Reality, Vox replied simply. For centuries, we maintained peace through fear and control. It worked after a fashion, but peace built on suppression is not true peace. It's merely postponed conflict. He activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Instead of the neat, ordered territories that had existed under Council rule, The map showed a complex web of independent worlds, trade alliances, and cooperative agreements. This, Vox continued, gesturing to the display, is far more stable than anything we ever achieved. Species cooperate because they choose to, not because they're forced to. Conflicts are resolved through negotiation rather than imposed through overwhelming force. Innovation flourishes without bureaucratic restriction. Sarah found herself genuinely impressed by the honesty of the admission. So what are you proposing? The dissolution of the Galactic Council as a governing authority. In its place, we offer to participate in whatever organizational structure the free species believe will best serve galactic civilization. The proposal was stunning in its scope. Sarah had expected demands, threats, maybe even attempts at negotiation. She hadn't expected complete capitulation. Counselor, you realize that such a change would mean the end of everything your civilization has worked to build for centuries. Vox's laugh was bitter, but somehow relieved. Ambassador, our civilization was already ending. Your species simply had the courage to accelerate the process. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. We spent so much effort maintaining control that we forgot why we wanted control in the first place. We wanted peace, prosperity, and progress for all species. But our methods were preventing the very things we claimed to support. Sarah activated her own display, showing the economic and social data that Marcus had shared with her earlier. The past year has been difficult, but you're right about the results. Galactic civilization is more productive, more innovative, and more stable now than it was under Council authority. Because species are working together voluntarily rather than being forced to cooperate through coercion. Vox studied the data with obvious interest. We never understood that true strength comes from unity chosen freely, not submission imposed through fear. Over the next several hours, Sarah and Vox worked through the details of what galactic civilization might look like without the Council's authoritarian structure. The conversation was surprisingly productive, helped by the fact that both sides were working toward the same goal, a stable, prosperous galaxy where all species could thrive. There will be challenges, Sarah warned. Without a central authority to maintain order, there will inevitably be conflicts between species with competing interests. But those conflicts will be resolved through negotiation and compromise rather than conquest and subjugation, Vox replied. And the resolution will be permanent because all parties will have agreed to it willingly. As the negotiations continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the journey that had brought them to this point. A year ago, humanity had been a minor species facing extinction for refusing to submit to alien authority. Now, they were helping to design a new form of galactic governance based on voluntary cooperation rather than imposed order. Counselor, can I ask you a personal question? Of course. Do you regret trying to subjugate humanity? Vox considered the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary to bring us to this point. But I'm grateful that your species had the strength to resist us. Without humanity's defiance, we might have continued our destructive path indefinitely. The final agreement took another 8 hours to negotiate, but when they finished, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment unlike anything in her diplomatic career. The document they'd created wasn't just a treaty. It was a constitution for a new kind of galactic civilization. The Free Species Compact, as they called it, established a decentralized system of governance based on voluntary association and mutual cooperation. Species could join or leave freely, contribute according to their abilities, and benefit according to their needs. Conflicts would be resolved through mediation rather than force, and no species would be compelled to act against their fundamental interests. Most importantly, the compact included provisions for technological and cultural exchange, ensuring that the innovations and knowledge developed by one species would benefit all members of galactic civilization. As Vox prepared to return to his ship, he turned to Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Ambassador, I want you to know that fighting humanity was both the greatest mistake and the greatest gift in Council history. How so? The mistake was obvious. We could never have defeated a species that refused to accept defeat. But the gift was showing us that there was another way. That civilization could be built on cooperation rather than domination. After Vox departed, Sarah returned to the observation lounge to watch the continuing stream of ships arriving at Independence Station. Vessels from dozens of species, carrying diplomats and traders, scientists and artists, all working together to build something unprecedented in galactic history. A civilization based on choice rather than compulsion. A government that derived its authority from the consent of the governed. A system where species prospered by cooperating with their neighbors rather than subjugating them. Marcus joined her at the viewport, carrying 2 cups of coffee from the station's human-operated cafe. "So," he said, handing her one of the cups, "how does it feel to have accidentally revolutionized galactic civilization?" Sarah laughed, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The ultimatum that started it all, humanity's desperate withdrawal from galactic society, the siege that nearly destroyed them, and the broadcast that changed everything. We didn't revolutionize anything, Marcus. We just proved that revolution was possible. And now, Sarah looked out at the ships from across the galaxy, all working together to build something better than what came before. Now we find out if we're wise enough to handle the freedom we've created. The challenges ahead would be enormous. Building a truly free galactic civilization would require unprecedented cooperation, compromise, and trust between species with wildly different cultures and interests. There would be conflicts, misunderstandings, and probably occasional failures. But for the first time in galactic history, those challenges would be faced by free peoples working together voluntarily rather than subjects following orders from distant overlords. Looking back, Sarah realized that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization hadn't been their technology or their military resistance. It had been their simple refusal to accept that submission was inevitable. They had shown the galaxy that there was always another choice. And sometimes the choice to say no to an impossible situation was the first step toward creating something beautiful. Outside the viewport, the stars shone with the light of 1,000 free worlds, each one choosing its own path through the cosmos, while working together to build a future worthy of all who shared it. Humanity had refused to negotiate their freedom away, and in doing so, they had given freedom to an entire galaxy. The revolution was complete. The real work was just beginning.